Hi everybody, I'm just doing a little jig while I wait for people to sign on. We will be talking about holding your paddle today, not about baton twirling, but I'm gonna wait for you to get on here because I am actually live today. And I'm so excited to be back here with you for SIC Talk Stories. So we're gonna be bringing this back, and I'm your host for today, Seychelle, and I am live. So please, if you're here, let me know, comment, question, interrupt me, distract me. This will be super fun. I'm gonna talk about how to hold your paddle. That's what we're gonna talk about today. And thanks so much for being here. And if you have your paddle, go grab it and you can play along. And I'm going to talk about basics, like super basics. I'm also going to talk about some more advanced descriptions, reasons, advice, how I think about and why the way I hold my paddle is. So with that in mind, this is the way I think about it. This is the way I'm going to explain it today. It is by no means an exhaustive way to explain or the only way to hold your paddle. It's not like my way or the highway. So as with everything that I give you, take what works for you, apply it to your paddling, try it, keep an open mind, and if it feels good, great. And if it doesn't, or if something somebody else said resonates more with you, that's also great. Okay, good. So you guys are commenting so you can hear me. Hi, Linan. Hi, Funch. Good morning. Actually, Funch, you're probably in Europe, so good afternoon. Cool. So let's talk about how to hold your paddle. The first thing I used to actually teach beginner SUP instructions. So the very first thing that excuse the dogs, the very first thing that I talk to people about when they grab their paddle is actually not the handle, but I want you to look at the blade of your paddle, because the blade always has an angle, right? So here's a level shaft. The blade is going at this angle, right? So when we hold a paddle, that angle is actually always going to be facing away from us. And funny story, I know you're probably like, Seychelle, I know this, but maybe there's some of you watching that don't know this. And funny story, even me, the first time that I grabbed a paddle, started to paddle this way with my paddle facing back towards me, the blade angle back towards me, because that's what we think we're taught. It's like, we think it's like a spoon, right? We think it's like a spoon and we're gonna grab the water. But it's not a spoon, it's a blade, and that angle goes away from you. And this is something that you can also explain to your friends when they are new to stand-up paddling. Now you know that you can remind them angle goes away. And most stand-up paddle brands put the logo on the front of the paddle. So another thing you can say is that logo, like see the back is no logo, the front has the logo always facing away from you. Or like if somebody's having a hard time with it, I say like put a big sticker on the front, right? And the sticker goes forward. So blade angle away. Why is that important? What does that actually do? What does that accomplish? Not to get into too much detail, but this angle is going to help you at the catch to get your paddle buried a little more quickly at the catch. Oh, I think I need to back up a little bit. To get your blade to bury at the catch, I'm gonna angle this down just a touch. There we go. the blade angle is going to help you get that paddle buried a little more quickly. It's also going to help you throughout your stroke to maintain a positive blade angle. And by positive blade angle, we're thinking about the surface area of your paddle blade that is being presented to the water, the working surface area of your paddle. So if you think about, here's a positive blade angle, here's neutral, and here's negative, right? I want to maintain as much as I can a positive blade angle. So having this angle to the blade also helps me to maintain that more when I'm paddling. So that's why. So that's the first thing, is your blade angle. Awesome. I'm just gonna check real quick for any comments or questions. And hey, Tommy. So number 2 that I want to go over pretty briefly is your paddle length. Now, when I started thinking about notes for paddle length, I was like, this should be a whole nother talk story. So I think it will be. Let me know in the comments if you think that's a good idea, to talk a whole entire talk story in detail about paddle length or height. But I want to touch on it briefly because I know that's going to be one of the questions for today. So typical average paddle height is anywhere from head high to like 8 inches above your head, right? And the length of how high your paddle is above your head is going to depend on the type of paddling that you're doing, the style of paddling that you're doing. It's also going to be dependent on the person, their body proportions, their skill level, and their technique and how they paddle, right? So this is not like it should be this many inches or centimeters above your head. That there's an average, and everybody's a little bit different, and you're gonna find what works for you, but I'll give you some averages, right? So if you're surfing, if you're SUP surfing, your paddle is typically going to be head high to like maybe 2 inches above your head. It's short. Why? Well, I'm going to talk about that in another one. So if you are racing, anywhere from like 3 to 6 inches above your head's pretty average. If you're more of a recreational paddler, it's more like 6 to 8 inches above your head. If you're a total beginner, it might even be a little bit longer. And again, without going into too much detail, how do I know if my paddle's the right length? So the best way to know if your paddle is the right length is when you're paddling, when you are fully loaded under power, and I can't demonstrate right now because I'm on the ground. My paddle can't go into the ground like it goes into the water. But when your paddle is, when you're fully under power, you want to have your arm and your shoulder be sitting in a really comfortable position. You don't want your shoulder to be jacked up here, and you also don't want to feel like you're like really far bent over, right? So I like to think about the integrity of the shoulder joint when I look at somebody's paddle length in relation to their body and their paddling style. So we could talk about that a lot more. Again, let me know if you think that's a good idea, and I will in a different talk story. But let's get into sort of the juice of what I want to talk about today, which is holding your paddle for paddling. And saludos, Jorge. Hi, Danielle. George, paddles. Yeah, you guys want me to talk about the size of the blade. You want me to talk about burying the blade. So that's all like technical stuff. And yeah, Tommy's on here in the comments, and he's saying some like, he's commenting some good stuff. So I'm not going to talk about, again, too many details about the technique, because I don't want to confuse you guys. I'm really going to try to maintain just talking about the paddle, how to hold it. So I've given you a few details. I know you're like, I want more. So we're going to do more talk stories on the blade angle and why, and on the paddle length and why, and how to make all that super optimal. So let's optimize holding the paddle. All right, you've got your T-grip or your handle, and one hand goes on top, and then the other hand goes how far down, right? That's the question. This is a really cool trick you learn when you're a beginner, and it still works even if you're advanced. Is you want to put your one hand on the handle, and then you want to make 90-degree bends with your elbows, and with both elbows at a 90-degree bend, so not out here or not in here, right? Like, I really want to be 90. And if you're like, I don't have a mirror, well, you can use a friend to show you. You can use your shadow. I'm using my shadow looking this way, right? So you can use your shadow, you can use a friend to tell you, where's 90-90 in my elbows? That's a really good starting point for where your bottom hand is going to be. That sucks. Let's see. Well, this will be a two-piece video. Am I still live, you guys? I can't still be live. Hello? My computer just shut. No. Somebody comment and let me know if I'm still live. If not, because my computer just closed. I'm still live? Oh my gosh, cool. Okay. Sorry about that interruption. We had like not an earthquake, but it was like my computer fell and great. Okay. So I can't put my computer on a tripod. I suppose I could. It's a good suggestion though, Darius. All right. So, wow, amazing. I'm still live. All right. So 90-90. This is a good starting point for where your bottom hand is going to be. My bottom hand does from time to time creep a little bit up or get a little bit lower. So where this bottom hand is, the lower it is to the water, it's going to be more, you're going to have more power, you're going to have more control, but it's also going to require more effort, and your body is going to have to get lower to get your blade fully buried. The higher up your hand is, it's a little bit more comfortable, it's a little bit more relaxed, you can stay a little bit more upright, but it's not going to give you as much control, it's not going to give you as much power when you're paddling. So if you find that you're somebody who your hand is always kind of creeping up, that typically happens more than somebody whose hand is always creeping down. A good tip is you can find that 90-90 and you can put a piece of tape on that spot. And if you put a piece of tape on that spot, you know where it is, and you can always be reminding yourself to put your hand there, right? And so I would play with that and finding out what's optimal for you. And as you're asking, Jorge's asking, can you give some pointers on holding the paddle to efficiently reach prior to the catch? That, you know, where you hold the paddle isn't going to, you're not going to change that to reach further at the catch, right? Like that's gonna stay at that same position throughout your stroke. It might change based on the conditions and where you're paddling and how you're paddling. So for example, if I'm paddling upwind and I'm getting a little bit lower, right? I said the lower your bottom hand is, the lower your body has to get. And so same thing, if I'm lowering my body, or the opposite, if I'm lowering my body because I'm paddling upwind, another SIC Talk Story I did a couple months ago, my bottom hand is gonna lower a bit because my whole body has lowered down, right? So, if I am getting really fatigued, for example, in the legs, and I don't want to be as low down, I want to be a little bit more upright, I might have my top hand shift up just a little bit so that I can be a little bit more upright, if that makes sense. So for the most part, it stays within like one hand length of going up or down. It's not like big differences here. I hope that's all clear. And then the next thing that I want to talk about is how I'm going to grip the paddle. So when you're holding your paddle, you want to have a relaxed grip. However, you want to have all of your fingers around the handle and around the shaft. And you'll often see paddlers with fingers outstretched on the top hand. You know, they're like so relaxed, they're not even holding the paddle, they're just putting pressure here on their palm of their hand and not actually gripping it. And then another thing you often see is like these bottom fingers not really doing anything because the grip is so relaxed here. And so, again, not my way or the highway, and I have heard different paddlers have different takes on this. However, here's my take on it and why. All of your fingers around the shaft, all of your fingers around the handle, unless you're doing a choke stroke, and then it's all of the fingers around the shaft on the top as well. And you can do that and still maintain a relaxed grip. The reason you want to have all of your fingers actually around the paddle and not having them extended, your fingers extended out straight here or here, is because our body, every muscle, every joint, it's connected, right? The hip bone's connected to the whatever, you remember the song. It's also connected, and we have anatomy chains that affect our bodies, our body mechanics, and the way that our muscles fire, right? The way that we engage certain muscles and the way that the rest of our body responds to that engagement and therefore reacts to it. A lot of those anatomy chains, they go all of those anatomy chains, and especially the specific ones that we're working on with paddling, which would be like the ones that extend down in the lats and then across into the glutes, these like really big muscles that we're using for paddling, they actually start in your fingertips, right? And so if you don't have your fingers around the paddle, it's almost like having a weak link in your chain, right? So the pinky specifically is actually the anatomy chain that goes up the back of the arm, into the lat, across to the opposite glute, and down the opposite back of the leg, right? So if you're not putting your pinky around the paddle, it's not that you're not going to get your lat and your glute to engage. It just can be optimized by actually putting the pinky around the paddle, actually putting the fingers around the paddle, and actually connecting all of those dots throughout the body to paddle more effectively and with more power, and in encouraging proper body mechanics. Does that make sense? I'm going to take a look at comments because I haven't looked in a few minutes. So grip on shaft, Tommy, I talked about that, and on the tee. Sam is commenting something really cool here, is like, she says, I don't get inner elbow pain anymore since adjusting my grip. And that's one of those things that this grip, especially, whether it's pinky or whether it's more of your index or middle finger, sometimes we have, when our body doesn't fire properly, all of those muscle chains firing properly, going down, that we need in order to use, because paddling is such a complex full body movement, right? So when one thing, but it's also so paddling's a complex full body movement, but the body is a master of compensation, right? So you're going to ask it to do something, and if it's at all possible, it's going to figure out how to do it. Whether or not it's doing it properly is a totally different story, right? So elbow pain's really common for paddlers. That was another talk story I did last year. So if you're curious, you can go back and look at the one for common paddling injuries where I talked about elbow pain. And one of the things I talked about is actually getting your lat to engage properly. Can help to take some of the stress off of those elbow tendons. That, think about the elbow as like the middle child. So if something's off in your grip, or if something's off in your shoulder and all of the, large muscle groups that attach in the whole shoulder girdle, right? So if something's off in either here or here, the elbow is going to take the extra strain to make it happen. So I can't say that this grip is going to fix your elbow pain, but if there is, but it could help, and it's totally worth trying, because for me and for many others, it has really helped with elbow pain, right, or with shoulder pain. And another thing that can help with shoulder pain is, as I talked about, which I will talk about more in depth in another talk story, is like having that shoulder be, when you're holding the paddle, how do I know if my paddle length is the right height? When I'm fully powered up, my shoulder is in a comfortable position in the shoulder joint. It's not extending out in a weird way, right? So if my paddle's too long or too short, I might have my shoulder be in an off position. I might have my shoulder be in an off position. All of these are so subject to person, right? So I want you guys to try these things out for yourself when you're paddling, where you're gonna have your bottom hand, how you're gonna hold the paddle, and notice, and I still have a bad habit of that bottom pinky being not totally around the paddle, and it's something that I'm getting better and better at, but I've been working on it for about a year. So you'll notice if that's a new thing for you, it's gonna take a while to get that to start reacting, remembering to keep all of 4 fingers onto the paddle, because old habits are hard to break. And if you think about it, when we're paddling, we take a stroke every like 1.5 seconds. Go lay down. We take a stroke every 1.5 seconds. So if you paddle for an hour, you're taking, I used to know how many, like 1,000 strokes, right? So that's a lot of muscle memory to do and undo. So give yourself some patience with that. And any other questions while I'm still here? I stopped getting comments, so I hope that I'm still live and everything's still good, because y'all were being super responsive, and now I haven't seen any in a little while. And there was one last thing I wanted to say. Keep an open mind, try these things. Old habits are hard to break, and let me know what you think. And then, again, also let me know what other things, which you have already, what you want to hear about in Talk Story, so I can talk about those things. Even if you're not watching this live, I will go back and I'll read your comments and your questions, so you can still leave them even if you're not watching live. And you can find me and reach out to me at Seychelle SUP on Facebook and Instagram. I love to hear from you. I love your questions about paddles, about SIC boards. Our next talk story that I'm going to be hosting is in 2 weeks, and it's actually about choosing a stand-up paddle board. So I'm going to talk about some of these beautiful boards behind me, which is really exciting. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for being here. Y'all are awesome. And I'm sending you so much warm sunshine and warmth and good vibes from Florida. And thank you so much to SIC for having me here to be able to have this platform to share with y'all this knowledge. And right before I go, I got one more question. The top hand, it moves a little the wrist. You went to one of my older clinics, Lynanne, and I always used to say a knuckles up, and I'm not so much of a knuckles up kind of person anymore, just to answer that question. Knuckles are, for the most part, they're up, but I think about it and I explain it a little bit differently now, how that top hand position is, and I think about it more, rather than the whole wrist, I think about the whole arm position. And so we can talk about that in more of a technical and more of a technical talk story. So, yeah, great. Ciao. Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks, SIC. I'll see you next time.